Well, welcome to Panel J. This is the Youth Engagement Panel. We're so looking forward to hearing what these passionate students think about and are absolutely, as I was saying, passionate about sustainability. With that, it would also be very interesting to know what they feel they did and didn't learn that's relevant to accounting and business in a sustainable future. And how, if anything, was there a difference between their academic and industry learning? So let us go and introduce the panelists. We have three marvelous students from the University of Notre Dame and three and current students from the University of Sydney. The University of Technology, Sydney. They're in the Bachelor of Accounting program, which is a cooperative program sponsored by industry in which they receive 2 full 6-month internships. So can I introduce Alvaro Carrillo? Alvaro, please tell us about your passion for sustainability.
Hi, everybody. As said, my name is Alvaro Carrillo. I studied at the University of Notre Dame. I'm a rising senior studying accounting and political science. This summer, I'm working in an internship at BlackRock, and I'm extremely passionate for sustainability. Got recently exposed to it in a course at my university, and I learned the importance it has on our daily lives, the importance that looking forward to the future, it is essential that we start changing the way we engage in business, we engage in basic accounting principles, and we see the world just fundamentally. It is essential that we start thinking the long-term impact our actions can have. And as a young individual, I'm excited to learn and be capacitated to know how to deal with these issues that we're facing now and will be extremely relevant in the years to come.
Thank you. Serene.
Hello, my name is Serene, and I'm a current student at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I'm doing a major in accounting and then a minor in management. And what really spurred me to do sustainability wasn't like some epiphany moment, but rather just small elements within the modules in accounting that made me realize, hey, a lot of the things that we buy and we pay for, the price that we're paying isn't actually accounting for the entire cost. And so I'm looking forward to the journey within finishing the rest of my degree and then further in industry to see the impact and hopefully the growth that sustainability will have.
Thank you, Serene. And we'll introduce Megan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Uhran. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Notre Dame. I majored in business analytics and minored in sustainability. And then this fall, I'll be joining Goldman Sachs in Chicago in their asset management division. For me, when it comes to combining sustainability into business education and business practices, there's two things that are really, really important to me, amongst, of course, many issues within sustainability. First would be the need for unification within sustainability reporting, just because there is so much data out there that is being reported on. We really want to work on unifying that into consistent reporting so that investors can have clear information regarding sustainability. And then the other thing that's really important to me is looking at investments and business practices as not just a way to maximize profits or maximize returns, but also a way to really have a positive impact through every business practice and investment decision we make. So of course, this can be done through different sustainable investments or sustainable practices and putting that at the forefront of business rather than on the back burner as an afterthought.
Thank you, Megan. And Arshdeep.
Hi, so my name is Arshdeep and I'm an accounting and finance graduate and I currently work in the banking sector. And for me, when it comes to, the conversation surrounding climate change and business, what I found in during my degree was that climate change sustainability was always something that was sort of mentioned as a passing topic towards the end. And I'm seeing now more than ever that, it's quite clear that climate change does have really serious financial consequences. And as a result, it's very, very relevant to finance and accounting. And so for me, I'm really interested in how, tertiary institutions can build more content into their curriculum so that students are, able to understand the direct financial consequences that climate change will be having. And I'll touch on that during the seminar.
Thank you, Arshdeep. And Aaron.
Thank you. So my name is Aaron Hilliker, and I'm going to be a senior at the fall in University of Notre Dame, and I study accountancy and music. What drew me to sustainability is I also took the same class as Alvaro and Megan did this past spring. And I was really intrigued by the idea of win-wins, because we talked in class a lot about how many organizations with strong ESG performance also performed very well in other metrics, especially financial metrics, but also just other broader measures of organizational performance. And I find that really interesting because well, we have to be careful about how we assign causality from it. But then it also makes sense because if you're concerned about something like your environmental impact, it shows that you can care about details that some people might neglect otherwise. So it means you really take a comprehensive look at your business. And so we shouldn't be surprised that you see better performance overall. And we have such a zero-sum outlook about so many problems in our society today, but something like improving your ESG performance offers a win for investors, a win for stakeholders, like even just the environment as a whole, and it wins for your business too. So I've been really intrigued by how that doesn't have that same zero-sum outlook as you see with so many other issues.
Thank you, Aaron. And Claire.
Hi everyone, I'm Clare O'Rourke and I'm currently an assistant brand manager at PepsiCo, and I was a graduate at UTS, the Bachelor of Accounting program, so I did accounting major and a marketing sub-major. I actually first became really interested in sustainability when I went on exchange to Sweden, and obviously Sweden is very advanced in terms of sustainability, and I was really blown away by how they tackle things like recycling and veganism, for example. And I thought that when I came back to Australia, I thought that Australian culture and the education system could really learn a lot from the Swedish way of life. So personally, as an individual, I'm really, I guess, inspired to see how individuals can, very minutely in their day-to-day life become more sustainable to become, a more inspiring and actionable individual in terms of how they can overcome climate change in their household and within their business.
Thank you, everyone. And Alvaro, could I ask you, I know you have a passion and you are interning ESG at BlackRock. What are some of the experiences you've had that have directed your passion in sustainability?
Yeah, of course. So it's mentioned in one of the courses that I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity of taking back in my university in Notre Dame, was the sustainability course that really hit a home run in showing to us the tangible impact the actions of companies taking with regards to climate change can really impact their financial performance. And working in looking into the asset management industry, you see those repercussions in the way you analyze a company and the way you think about a company moving forward. And that affects them in a lot of different ways, but in a simple way is valuation. Companies that are looking and paying attention and they're actually acting with this challenge we're facing of climate change are going to be better well positioned for the future. In a world that natural resources become more scarce, our energy, which are energy sources that are not renewable, will become more expensive, harder to get access to. If people are not thinking about this kind of stuff in the future, they will be adversely affected. And as a young individual looking into the future, it is essential that we help companies as well as just ourselves in the day-to-day to change the way we approach our actions and our business models. Because if we don't start preparing for a long-term position, it's not gonna be a very good situation.
Would a universal framework for reporting impact the overall ESG transformation of companies?
Oh, I agree 100%. One of the most important things for massive change and successful analysis is the use of data. When you have data from different sources, you have a way to unify the data, but that takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of time, and takes a lot of expertise. If you have one sort of universal framework that companies can follow, for example, you look at 10Ks. The 10Ks companies have their own differences, but they typically follow the same format, and it is easier for for firms to analyze those 10Ks. If you have firms that are reporting the same way their ESG data, how much energy they consume, how are they dealing with certain metrics, it becomes easier to analyze everything. And when you have the ability to analyze things, you can make better informed decisions. And that's why this universal reporting framework is key. I certainly believe that without a universal framework, it's going to take a lot more years to do tangible change.
And I open it to the panel. What are your thoughts about a universal framework?
I can hop in and jump off of what Alvaro was saying. Like I mentioned earlier, universal reporting is something that's very important to me. I worked on a capstone project this past year, all about trying to find that perfect universal reporting system, which is definitely, I wouldn't say that my answer was the right answer, but it's something that I'm interested in looking into further. One thing, like Alvaro was talking about with 10Ks, is there are certain documents that can be published that are regulated. And if we can get some kind of universal sustainability reporting framework that is regulated so that investors and people interested in sustainability know that companies aren't exaggerating maybe their sustainable efforts or attempting greenwashing and making themselves seem like they care about the environment more than they actually do, that would really help investors and just general public have a lot more clarity when it comes to sustainability. So I definitely second Alvaro that it's really, really important so that investors are comfortable with sustainability and do want to put their money into those initiatives.
I also feel like I completely agree. And I also feel like introducing climate-related financial disclosures and implementing, an international standard for these would really not only ensure that organizations are more accountable, but also encourage more comparability. And, it's just recently that the G7 made a decision to, mandate climate-related financial disclosures. So I think it's a really evolving area. And also in terms of job opportunities, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for finance and accounting graduates in this area, which is, why I think that it's so important that we begin, educating students about it so that they're made aware that these opportunities exist and that they will be increasing.
And I'll throw to you, Claire. How can universities then support the environmental endeavours and passions of students?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a couple of actions that can be implemented quite quickly, I think, and quite easily. So I think making sure that students feel that the subject's environmental content is actually integrated and at the fore of what they're learning. So not just added on in the end as an afterthought, as Megan was touching on before, but actually, bringing it into the first, second, all those kinds of different seminars and classes that they're doing and engaging with it in a proper manner. And then also examining students on the content so that they actually have to thoughtfully engage with it rather than just hearing it in the last seminar and not, thinking about it again. And I think another example would be having case study assignments and projects that center around sustainability. So really ensuring, again, that students are engaging thoughtfully with the environmental content. And I think that can be really easily integrated into finance and accounting kind of subjects because like we are all touching on here, businesses have to report on their environmental practices going forward. So if we can really center projects around that and have a segment in a project that is encouraging students to think about sustainable solutions, I think that's also a really encouraging example. And then just other things like bringing in guest lectures that cross over in terms of the business world and the sustainability world. So having CEOs come in from sustainable businesses to encourage students to pursue that career path and really showcase how their future career could look in the sustainability and business world. And I guess lastly, another idea I had was having career and counselling teams have career nights that really showcase cross-faculty careers that bring business and sustainability together. So I think those are all really actionable and easy solutions that universities can bring to students to encourage them to think more broadly about sustainability and their future careers.
And I open it to the floor. What are your thoughts on what Claire has said? And do you have any additional comments?
I definitely second what Claire has to say. And And I find that within the business faculty and then the wider university, you could be integrating sustainability so much more. So in my personal experience, the accounting major, or what I've done of it so far, as Claire mentioned, it's kind of an afterthought. It's kind of like a week 10 wrap up right before exams. We'll touch on, how do you report for your water usage? How do you report for like toxins released into the environment? And the only option you do have to study something sustainability wise is if you choose an actual business elective separate to an accounting and finance major. So I just did this in the semester that just finished, and it opened my eyes so much to what we missed in our accounting major and also in the core foundation subjects of business. That was never mentioned, but it plays such a big role. And think in 10 years' time, the impact that climate change will have if we continue at the trajectory we are now. So I definitely think that, there is definitely room for improvement in terms of integration.
And Megan, I know that you're interested too in how sustainability incorporated into an academic curriculum, specifically a business curriculum. What are your thoughts?
Definitely. Well, I definitely second what Claire and Serene have discussed about how it needs to be brought to the forefront, rather than on the back end of academics. And also, I just wanted to point out that as a student at Notre Dame, I've definitely noticed a lot of interest from students regarding sustainability. I've had multiple courses where we're working on case studies or different group projects. And while sustainability is not addressed in the prompt at all from the professor, students themselves are raising sustainability as potential answers, potential solutions, and points they want to address in these case studies. Or there's also additional, when you have the flexibility to do your own research project, that's when students are bringing in sustainability pretty often. So I definitely would say that there is a demand from the students to incorporate sustainability into our business courses and other academic courses. And I do think that while it's great to have specific courses that address sustainability throughout the entire course very upfront, it's also really helpful to have sustainability kind of weaved in throughout courses as well, so that we know it's not just a separate subject. It is truly it can be ingrained in everything we do within business.
Sorry, just to jump in there again, I think that's what's great about the UTS Bachelor of Accounting degree is that we do have sponsors that are focused on environmental pursuits as well as business. So companies like Lend-Lease, who really, the environment is at the fore of what they do because they are in property. So that's really allowing students, future students and current students to see where their career can really come into both again accounting and the environment, and bringing that together harmoniously. So having those businesses at the forefront of, I guess, career conversations and future aspirations, I think that's a really great thing that the UTS Bachelor of Accounting degree also can inspire students to do.
And I'm going to ask Aaron, but I do throw this to the floor afterwards. How do you recommend students translate their environmental passions into careers?
Sure, thanks, Michelle. So I think a lot of students my age or maybe younger students like high school, I think there's a conception that if you're trying to get involved in environmental work, that the best way to do that, or maybe the only way even to do that, is through direct advocacy, like you might see in, organizing maybe protests or petitions, things like that. There's a lot of work already that a lot of young people do on that front, just in their own lives. But there seems to be a disconnect between that and the possibility of working in a business environment. Many people I've spoken to my age have a lot of negative conceptions of business as a profession, and they might think that maybe you're just kind of working with money. But if you're working in something like accounting, where you could maybe verify someone's sustainability performance, that could be a very powerful way to contribute to environmental causes in a very practical way. So I think that we can really drive youth participation on that front by just informing them that, hey, this is out there. You can actually make a difference in sustainability, do something other than protests, which are very good, but you can do something that will, you have more access, I guess, to the levers of power in a more tangible way.
That's right. That's right. Business for purpose. And anybody else? What do you think? How can the translate passion?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Aaron, that Aaron made. I think another thing that's changing is our generation if you look, there's multiple studies out there that show some of the biggest problems that generations think are in need to be addressed short term or long term, and our generation, one of the biggest problems we see is the dire need to address climate change, and the physical risks that would have in our daily lives. And companies recognize this. Companies that want to attract good young talent need to address this kind of stuff. People from our age, if you're looking to find a company where to work and you see they're extremely reliant on fossil fuels, they have very low diversity numbers. You see the senior leadership and they're taking questionable decisions. People our age really pay attention to that. And we have that. Sometimes it's hard to understand because we may be young and we want we want a job or something out of college, but we actually do have the power to pick which companies we want to work in, and companies recognize this and they need to adapt to be able to attract good young talent. And we have a lot of influence over these companies, and we're seeing this happening. Now you're seeing some of the top companies in the world investing millions of dollars in the diversity programs and hiring individuals and being sure that they're establishing good work practices. They're not tolerating discrimination. And that's a big part of the push by our own generation. And we do have a lot of influence, and we got to keep that in mind, because we have more influence than we think.
Thank you, Alvaro. And Megan?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Alvaro, that's definitely true for where our generation is entering the workforce. And it's definitely also true from the consumer perspective and the investment perspective. While our generation may not have that much money to invest yet, since we are still young, there's a lot higher percentages of millennials and Gen Z that are interested in sustainability when it comes to investments, and also where they're getting their consumer products from. So it's not only, how are we making the workplace environment sustainable, environmentally conscious, free from discrimination, things of that nature, but it's also, the products we're creating, the services we're creating, are those also in line with the passions of the younger generations? Are they, and things of that nature. So I think it's definitely true, not just in the workplace, but also the consumer side and the investment side, where a lot of younger generations like us want to invest more sustainably. We just don't have as much capital yet, but we'll get there once we get older.
I certainly hope so. Claire?
Yeah, I think it's about empowering individuals and young people to take action in their workplace. So I personally, when I worked at Coca-Cola Amatil, I actually felt really empowered to bring a new sustainability employee group to the company. So I created the first ever employee green team, where we kind of met on a monthly basis and ensured that we were implementing structures around the office that made the business more sustainable. And also, how are we going to educate and communicate Coca-Cola's environmental practices to our employees so that they could be really great advocates for the company as well in that regard. So I think that empowerment can come from a university level to start with. So really, going back to encouraging students to actually engage with environmental content, to realize its importance. I don't think we really need to drum home the importance of environmental causes to our young people, because I think we already know that, but really just empowering them to take that into their workplaces, take action, and actually see a change, because I think we all have something to say as young people and something to do, and I think we just really need to encourage people to actually take action when they go into the workplace, even as young people, because we can make a really big change.
Thanks, Claire. And Arshdeep?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to build on the points that have been raised about, the importance of integrating climate change into finance and accounting tertiary studies, because at least in my experience, firstly, I found that it was always, like Claire mentioned earlier, an afterthought. But also, I feel like whenever the topic of climate change was raised in the context of business, it was quite centered around business supply chains. So, for example, what sort of materials are they sourcing? Are they sustainable? Is their manufacturing facility powered by clean energy? Is their packaging, sustainable and not using plastic, etc.? And, the point that I'd really like to raise is the fact that, we're realizing that climate-related risks have a direct impact on the finances of a company, because they impact, the cash flows, they impact on asset valuations, they impact on, the credit risk of a company. And this does have a direct impact on the financial statements. And so, even for someone that is pursuing a finance and accounting career, I think that, our education curriculum needs to teach students exactly how they're firstly able to identify these climate-related risks, and then be able to quantify their impact and identify exactly where in the financial statements they're having an impact. So, for example, when we're looking at climate-related risks, you've got, physical risks such as extreme weather events, and you've got organizations that are building risk-based models in order to understand exactly, how frequently these extreme weather events are occurring and the magnitude of these extreme weather events. And organizations can, leverage these risk-based models to understand, based on where their operations are located, how these, extreme weather events are actually going to impact, for instance, their assets. Do they need to be impaired? Is the future, the fair value of these assets need to be reconsidered? What is their useful life, etc. All that stuff that is so core to an accounting degree is directly applicable to climate change. Another example of physical risks is just the gradual increase in global temperatures that we're seeing. I know that's something that's very relevant to the agricultural sector, because we're seeing how an increase in global temperatures is having a direct impact on soil quality, which then impacts crop yield, which has an impact on earnings. That directly feeds into the financial statements. And, on top of the physical risks of climate change, we've also got the transition risks. So, it was mentioned earlier how there's definitely a change in consumer preferences. So, for instance, we're opting towards cleaner energy. We're also seeing government policy in many countries reflect this. And this has an impact on, the assets of companies that are, in the fossil fuel sector, for instance. And so, we're seeing that climate change has a direct impact on company earnings, cash flows, as well as asset valuations. Another example is expected credit losses, particularly for financial institutions. You've got, the banking sector, where some banks are, quite exposed to businesses that will be really impacted by climate change. And so, ultimately, I think, these examples just come to show how directly relevant climate change is to the finance and accounting sector. And it's definitely, not something that should be an afterthought. And, at least during my finance and accounting studies, that was never something that was raised. And I think that we need to start teaching students exactly how, climate-related risks need to be considered in the context of, finance and accounting. And the reason I think that this is so important is because not only is it integral to the credibility of financial statements, but also I feel like once we start pricing in the risks of climate change, that's when a lot of people will start to take this topic a lot more seriously.
Thank you, Arshdeep. And I'm going to ask Aaron, and then I'd like a comment from all of you. That we're talking about learnings in the curriculum, incorporating it in the curriculum, but how can young people get involved?
So we can get people involved by starting to introduce the ideas of sustainable business and ESG to high school and college students who are still deciding what to study. And that can even go for your first 2 or so years of college, because I just finished my junior year and I'm in an audit internship right now, and only now am I really figuring out what audit actually is. So in the same way, the earlier you get exposed to sustainability topics, the better in that case. And you could even, you could go to high school or college career centers and hold presentations, or you could introduce some of the concepts into curriculums of even high school economics or something like that. I know that when I went to high school, we had a required economics course, but we didn't learn anything about. So I mean, there's the idea of marginal social benefit and marginal social cost, and we didn't discuss how externalities can come about from environmental issues and how businesses have the economic impacts of these externalities affecting them. So that would be a great way to introduce students to this topic and hopefully pull them in so that we can work together on it.
Thank you, Aaron. And how do you feel, the panel? How do you think you can get young people to be involved, just generally in this action?
I can hop in there. So I think just other ways would be to encourage students to join environmental clubs that the university has. So that really allows them to take action and find like-minded people to bounce ideas off and to spread the message even further. And then also kind of, leading on what we've all been saying is to just seek companies that are putting the environment at the forefront of all their decisions. So if they want to do an internship or they want to become a graduate after their studies, keep seeking out those companies and network with the professionals in those businesses, because that will again open up their mind for their future. And then I guess just personally, it's just holding themselves accountable, talking to their families and friends, holding them accountable as well for being sustainable. Shopping secondhand clothing rather than supporting fast fashion brands is something that's really important to me. Maybe eating more plant-based, recycling soft plastic. So I think there's always steps personally and professionally and within your education that you can take. So it's having that holistic perspective to your life when it comes to the environment.
And Serene?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree.
What are your thoughts?
Just jumping off, especially like things that you can do at university as a student, joining those clubs and societies, but actually you can hold the university accountable. Like you can start by speaking to, for instance, your teachers at uni. You can start speaking to, we have like a student association, how can we get more recycling initiatives? And I feel like through that you can build up so that once you are at that corporate level, when you are a graduate, that you can start, speaking to management. Like I know Claire mentioned that she set up like a team of sustainability, so that by the time you do get to that corporate stage, that you can implement initiatives such as that within the actual business, and then that will have a holistic impact on, who the business, all the stakeholders of the business, essentially.
Thank you. And Aaron, I know you've sort of mentioned it, but have you seen your generation push for ESG related policies, so even in companies other than university?
Yeah, I've seen, even at my own university, before this sustainability class was even taught, this past fall, there was a push from a group called NDSRI, or Socially Responsible Investing, that was calling on the university to divest from private prisons. And there had been a history of activism in the university for decades, actually, about a variety of similar issues. For instance, our professor in our class mentioned that, I believe it was in the 70s or 80s, that a group of nuns actually worked to help divest from, I think it might have been Exxon specifically, or it might have been broader like fossil fuel companies. But so that shows how one way to look at involved is through grassroots mobilization.
Thank you. And Alvaro, another area of your passion?
Yeah, I think that's what Aaron said is crucial. We have the voice to put pressure on where we are. We are stakeholders of our universities, of the companies we seek to work in, our communities, and we do have a lot of power and the ability to do change. I think the examples Aaron gave were on the money. Institutions have to hear what their stakeholders are thinking, and in the past few years we've seen this trend of divestment becoming more real. Institutions are seeing this, and this is a key phrase, is climate risk is investment risk. And many firms and many investment firms are seeing that and are understanding that. and they're divesting from these type of exposures. And a lot of this comes from their own analysis, their own decision making, but also a lot of these decisions come from people who are pushing for this, people who have access, for example, in proxy voting in the companies. They're forcing these companies to take action through their own house, indoors. They're voting on actions, and these companies have to act on this kind of stuff. So, there's a lot of variables moving around that push for these type of behavior and change. But it all starts from your own stakeholders, individuals like us. We start this, and then the expectation that it reaches a top end, and we see, high level decisions being made, which we are seeing.
Thank you. And I have a question just to pose to each of you, and I'd like a response. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future state of our environment?
Yeah, I feel like, my level of optimism and pessimism changes a lot. I feel like, when I'm watching the news and, I'm hearing decisions made by, our governments, in terms of, not really taking climate policy seriously. Or, when I hear things such as, the fossil fuel sector getting funding for, expanding their operations and things such as that, I feel really pessimistic. But, when I'm having conversations with really like-minded individuals, such as this forum, and I can see that there's so many people, particularly young people, that are so passionate about this area, I also feel really optimistic. So, I feel like there is definitely so much that is happening, and we still have an opportunity to get to a point where, we're able to, I guess, not cause irreversible damage. But I also, recognize that the timeline that we have to work against is really, really short as well. So, I think my short answer to that is my optimism and pessimism varies a lot depending on, the context.
Thank you. And Megan?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't come to me because this is quite a daunting question. I definitely would say that I definitely go back and forth as well. I think for me, when I look at some industries, I get really excited. Like I get really excited about how we're, starting to move the automobile industry away from, non-renewable energy towards renewable energy. And I can see concrete progress, and I see other people getting excited about that industry. And that gives me a lot of hope. And then in other industries, like how agriculture works in the United States, I get really scared and really pessimistic because it seems so daunting, and I don't know how we're going to, completely change an entire industry to become more sustainable and really, really make some significant changes. So I think it definitely depends on the industry that I'm looking at. But what does make me excited is that there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy in our generation. So people our age are really excited about trying to create the solutions to these problems. And so I think I might be a little more pessimistic over the next 5 years, but once, we really start making some traction in some of these industries, I have a feeling that we will be able to start to really turn it around.
Thank you. And Claire?
Yeah, so I think I also oscillate between the two, being pessimistic and optimistic. I think optimistically, I've been working at quite big companies, Coke and Pepsi, and I feel optimistic when I do see big businesses like that taking big action in terms of climate action and their recycling schemes and all of that kind of thing. So I'm also really optimistic when I see startups as well in the Sydney space who, for example, are making sustainable meat out of animal cells rather than actually, grass feeding and all that really detrimental impacts that come from big agricultural firms. So yeah, those kinds of companies do make me really optimistic, but it does largely, I am quite pessimistic when I do see large fast fashion brands still dominating the high streets and still dominating what my friends and family wear, because they're obviously having such a big impact on the environment and the amount of landfill that is going into the planet. And I regularly go swimming in the ocean, so Bondi Beach, for those who know it, down in Sydney. So I regularly swim down there, and it is really, really disheartening to see pollution in those oceans as well. And not only that, you do see fish swimming around, so it's really saddening to know that those fish would probably be consuming a lot of the waste that is in those oceans. And with this pandemic happening at the moment, there's a lot of litter on the streets in terms of those masks, non-reusable masks. They're littered everywhere in the streets. So that kind of does make me a little bit pessimistic, to be honest. And I think that right now we really do need to lean on the older people that are in management positions and positions of power, because they really need to take charge and educate themselves about this problem. And yeah, I just feel like at the moment, some of those people, some of those CEOs and people in the C-suite or people in political positions, they just aren't educated enough and well-versed enough to be making actual change.
Thank you. And Aaron?
Yeah. To be honest, I tend to be a bit of a pessimistic person in general. So maybe take me with a grain of salt here. But I think probably on the whole, I also tend to fluctuate sometimes, but I think on the whole, I tend to lean more pessimistic. I will say we have seen some good progress recently. For instance, within the past couple months, we saw some big management changes at Exxon that I don't think anyone ever thought really would happen. And since they were one of the major holdouts among energy companies of trying to transition more towards friendlier fuels, I think that's a really positive step. There seem to be some promising things coming out of the SEC here in the US, but at the same time, there's also not too much. Well, there are at least some good ideas being put out there, but it doesn't seem like they're being put into regulation just yet. I am definitely hoping we will, like we were touching earlier on the importance of that. I'm working in audit right now, and like we need to have some sort of standard to audit off of in order to actually be able to provide a full degree of assurance. But yeah, with just broader social issues, there are a lot of people, like Clare was saying, like, I mean, older generations, like they haven't had as much exposure to this field of research because it's still been developing and still is. And there's also just, we've seen so many disagreements on facts on a number of issues throughout the US for the past couple of years here, with just the rise of social media has just created so many of these different information ecosystems that it's just hard to know what to believe. And that's making it hard to even agree on the basics of, is the climate changing? Is it man-made? And I think without a consensus on that, it's going to be really difficult to try and implement changes that might not always be easy. Like we also see in some sectors that, there's a lot of reskilling that's required from shutting down like older fossil fuel plants. And that can be a very painful process for a lot of like real people out there. And so we need to make sure that when we do add new jobs for renewable energy, that we're taking care of these people. But it also doesn't seem like that's always accounted for in the plans, at least not in a way that's very satisfying to those stakeholders. So on the whole, I think I tend to be a bit pessimistic, but I think we're starting to see some, kind of a rose growing through the concrete, so to speak.
Thank you for those comments, Aaron. Very insightful. And Alvaro?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a different side. I'm extremely optimistic. And that is because we're down so bad right now that from now on it's all going up. And that's the way I see it. Like everybody, some people believe this is real and are already acting on it. Some people don't. But I think the people that don't believe on this, the tangible consequences of climate change, they're actually seeing it now visibly, whether it's physical damage or directly impacting their own pockets. And I think Arash made an amazing point about explaining, the transition risk and the physical risk, and everybody's seeing the consequences of these climate developments. And I believe, we're seeing good developments globally. You can see even in China, in the Asia Pacific region, a huge economy like China, it's establishing one at the moment, one of the biggest cap and trade programs that caps the emissions a company can issue and even incentivize them to trade them. So, it's utilizing a capitalistic mindset to combat climate change, and it's reaping huge rewards, and it's working. You move to Europe. The European Union recently issued one of the biggest blocks of green bonds in the history of the region, and that's all that money is going directly to finance green related projects. That's a big, it's a huge topic, but that's a good direction. And Europe has been ahead of this for a long time. And then you move to the United States, and we have a new administration that's actually more conscious of what's happening. It's trying to change past policies. It's incentivizing a transition into more sustainable energy, renewable energy. So you see this trend globally, and it gives you hope. It gives you hope for sure. And I think companies. Going back to what Ara said last time, she was said on her comment last time. Companies are starting to price this as well. They're pricing this risk, and by pricing this risk, they know they have to act. If they don't act, they'll be affected negatively financially. So I'm optimistic, but I'm optimistic recognizing how behind we are at the moment, but we are making progress. We are making stride, and we're innovating. We're showing we have a resiliency to innovate and get used to what's happening and our challenges and thrive. So that's why I'm optimistic. There's a lot of room for growth and improvement, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Thank you for being our sunshine, Alvaro. And Serene.
Yeah, I do get flickers of hope, especially when I do see like startups, or I see companies in their annual reports starting to integrate sustainability reporting. But I think on the whole, given the lack of time and the urgency we have to reverse the damage we've already had on the climate, I would say I'm pessimistic in a sense that I worry that we're not going to hit that 2030 target. And especially from like an Australian perspective, we've already seen like bushfires, we've seen floods happen within the same month. And these extreme weather events make you think, oh, hold on, this is something that's already happening. And I worry that if we haven't transitioned fully to renewable energy, such as solar, and we still keep mining coal, that we're not going to hit these targets in time. So I think, and this isn't helped by, you see a lot of companies like greenwashing, so they'll make up their own metric standards for to window dress so that the government doesn't stop and say, hey, we actually need ESG requirements. We need a set standard of reporting on environmental sustainability. So I think that if within the next 5 years there hasn't been considerable action, which at the moment I don't see happening, at least within Australia, and I know Europe might be is a different circumstance. However, on the whole, I would say I'm pessimistic.
So if everyone is quite pessimistic, what are some of the ways that we can change this, in your view, with your generation?
Yeah, I can take that. One thing that I think is really important, and probably one of the few negatives of sustainability, is that there's sometimes a lot of guilt and a lot of negative peer pressure almost, where it's okay, if you're not completely vegan, completely shopping secondhand, doing all of the sustainable checklist items, then you're not truly trying to be sustainable and you're not making an effort enough. And then sometimes that makes a lot of people completely pessimistic and shy away from the whole idea entirely. And so I think one thing to really start changing this view and trying to get more people on board with sustainability is giving a lot of different ways to be, giving a lot of different options to be sustainable to people. So for example, if, changing to a vegan diet is something that's, exciting or easy for you to do, go for that. If that's something that does not interest you, then there's other ways to get involved, whether that's investing your money in more green energy opportunities, maybe trying to use your car less. There's a really, really wide range of opportunities. And I think trying to remove some of that guilt to be perfect and instead encouraging people to just do whatever little thing they can, I think that will really start to help get the ball rolling and make more people feel comfortable and kind of encouraged and welcomed into the sustainable community.
Thank you, Megan. And Aaron, our pessimist?
Yeah. I think one of the best ways that we can work against that is just to start talking to people. If you hear people who are disagreeing with you or are speaking out against the policies you're advocating for, just to dig deeper and to ask, well, why? And you might kind of disagree with some of their takes on factual issues, but in some ways that doesn't necessarily matter because they're still going to be opposed to it. So you have to really dig down to the root issue and see what is it that they need as a person, and how can we provide that? How can we make sure that as we try to improve our climate performance, that we improve just as a society in caring for everyone and for all of their needs?
And Claire?
Yeah, so I think a really great way of changing people's views is to actually just inspire through your own actions. So, people don't necessarily tune in when you're debating or going on a rant about sustainability. So if you actually just show them through your actions, I think that they latch onto that a lot more. So for example, when I was living with my parents, I actively went out and bought a worm farm so that we could compost some of our food waste. And from that, they were really encouraged and they really got on board and started disposing of it themselves. And then, what I was touching on before about the green team at Coca-Cola. So that was really all about showing employees how you can act more sustainably. So showing through action rather than lots of words. And I think Arshdeep actually told me this quote, and I really resonate with it. And I think it really harks back to this conversation, is that we would benefit from having 1,000 imperfect sustainability enthusiasts than one perfect sustainability enthusiast. So if we all just kind of get on board, like Megan was saying, if we just do our part little by little, I think that is what makes a really big change.
Thank you. And that's a great quote. And Arshdeep, do you have anything to add to that quote?
I guess, everyone's already touched on, the impact that we can make at a grassroots level. And, like Claire just spoke about how, through, rather than, bringing up the issue in a judgmental way, we sort of inspire people through our own action. And Megan, also raised the point about how, we need to sort of remove the guilt of not being perfect, but just take baby steps. So I think, at a grassroots level, there's a lot that can be done. And we've had a lot of conversations in this seminar about, how climate change can also be brought to the conversation in the corporate sector. I think another point, just to close off, I'd like to raise also is that, the government sector also plays a really, really key role. And so, I think that if, people are interested in the area of policy, that's also an area where, there's a lot of change that needs to be made. And I think that government policy has the power to also bring about a lot of serious change. So, that's just another area I thought that is also relevant.
Alvaro, I saw you agreeing with that quite vehemently. Would you like to expand?
No, I agree 100% with that. The government has a huge role to play in this, and we impact that. But yeah, the Serene was mentioning before that she thinks it's going to be hard for us to reach the goal in 2030, and I agree 100% with her. And the only way to reach these ambitious goals set in the Paris Agreement and other agreements that independent sovereign nations have made is through meaningful investment and radical change. And that's not going to happen from one day to another by personal will. Some people are vivid activists of sustainability, but the reality is, we're still miles away from that. And to be able to do this huge monumental transformation in the way we practice our day to day, and the way we use energy, we mine coal, all these kind of practices, it takes a huge role by the government. And if we don't have that intervention, it's going to be a big impact. I think if you compare just basic, very high level, you compare European countries with the United States, you see this drastic change. Like Europe is miles ahead when it comes to reporting, when it comes to just sustainable business practices. They're miles ahead of the United States. And a big part of that is because the government has intervened in these countries. The government has implemented legislation to force these companies to do certain practices. And I'm focusing on the United States because I live here, but this applies globally. Every government has to intervene because it's just part of it, like through subsidizing new industries and industries that are getting creative. That plays a huge role in the way we practice. We're trying solve the biggest issue. I'd say one of the biggest issues we're facing right now, and it's not going to be solved easily. It's a huge challenge, and we got to be creative. We have to think outside the box, and a lot of that requires a lot of capital, and the government can sure give a hand on that through subsidization. So yeah, that's why I strongly believe on that comment.
Thank you so much, everyone. We have 2 minutes left of our session. You've been absolutely wonderful. It's been incredible to see young people with such passion. So I ask you one last question. What is the last thing you'd like people to hear?
I think I can go first, and it's really just taking those small actions in your day-to-day life. Tackling sustainability doesn't have to be a big ordeal. I think just take small little steps, and that makes big change.
Serene.
Yeah, I think grassroots action is the way to go. So build your own awareness, share with family and friends, let them know, hey, this is a situation. Maybe we should, for instance, start going thrifting instead of buying first-hand clothing.
Megan.
Yeah, not only can we do small sustainable changes on our individual level, but put pressure on the schools you go to, put pressure on the governments in the places you live, and put pressure on the companies you work for. They have a lot more money and influence than we do individually. So make sure that you're putting pressure on them to do some sustainable change as well.
Arshdeep.
Yeah, I'd say, don't sort of feel like, if you're pursuing a business degree that, and you have a passion for climate change, that those two can't be pursued together, because there's most definitely an interconnectedness. And if you're passionate about climate change and sustainability, and you also, want to pursue a business career in the government or corporate sector, definitely the two can be combined.
Aaron.
Yeah, use your voice, but use your ears and your heart too.
Fantastic. Alvaro.
Educate yourself and educate those around you. I think the facts are there, and it's just, that's straightforward.
Well, that concludes our panel for today. Thank you so much for participating. It's been wonderful hearing your voices, and keep using them.